Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll be the first to say a massive congratulations because we have reached a 100th mile hallmark for this channel in such a short space of time. And in order to mark this auspicious occasion, and because this was a video I was always going to make towards the end of the month anyway, as I speak now, it's 7:45 at night on St. Andrew's Day, the 30th of November 2025, and the reason why I was always going to make this video anyway is because, well, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of my backstory, if you will. I want you guys to know a little bit more about me. In particular, a series of events that happened to me 10 years ago. Now, if it does sound a little bit familiar, that is because about back in 2021, during the very beginning of September, I'm making a very similar video to the one I did 4 years ago. Because in the video I did 4 years ago, I described how it was 10 years on from when I was in year 9, basically, at school. So between the years of 2011 to 2012. So between the ages of 13 and 14, basically. Now, for those who want a little bit of a refresher about it, I described that time of my life as incredibly demanding, challenging, not really that rewarding, and throughout the period of 10 whole months, there was nothing but agony, anguish, disappointment, failure, and just an overwhelming desire to be literally anywhere else on Earth. Yeah, long story short, I did not exactly have the best of years, and it was pretty much all of it in school. And you don't need to tell me twice that if your social functions of choice is literally either go to school or literally stay in bed all day and literally not interact with the rest of the world, when even school, the one place you're required to go to anyway, as a kid and whatnot, even when that becomes like you would rather be anywhere else, believe you me, it comes out in patches, and you will not believe how bad I can still remember just the feeling deep inside my body about how it was one of the most miserable and degrading times of my entire life. And to be honest, there were things that happened when I was that age that, to be honest, I still haven't recovered from, and I'll never get an explanation as to some of the things that happened. In fact, before we go any further, I'll give you one example of the kind of humiliation that occurred. So, because they at the end of year 9, you have to decide which sort of GCSEs you want to take, and in order to, well, if you didn't think kids were under enough pressure at that age anyway, let me put it to you like this: they also had us undertake an extra language course, and I think they slapped another. I don't know exactly what else they slapped in as well, but they put something alongside. Either way, there was more cramming than ever before. And in particular, it was if it was the choice between to do alongside English and French, I had the options to do either Italian or German. I chose Italian. I'm not too sure why, but let me put it. Let's speaking of it. Well, when we're on the subject of Italian, let me put it to you like this: at about some point, at about late February, about a select chosen of our class were chosen alongside another Italian class in the same year. And apparently, we, based on our performance and based on, our behaviours and stuff like that, there was a great opportunity that so we would be going on a week-long vacation to Italy, and it was sort of put together by the joint heads of the language department, husband and wife, believe it or not. I'm sure those two must have been retired by about the time when I left school, but we'll get to that later. So we crack on. I try to get, because here's the thing, I was very, very well behaved when I was in school. I never kicked off, never had any fights with teachers or anything like that, never had any fights with anybody else. I just got me head down. It was drilled into me, by the way, to keep my head down and to work. And the problem with this, and it plays a little bit into what happens, like, when I was younger and, to be honest, well into adulthood, like even right now, is that I think what they did is that they kind of forced it in a bit too hard. So they turned somebody in who was the definition of meek, aka somebody you wouldn't hear a peep out of, and somebody who just kind of wanted to learn, get on with it and just work and stuff like that. And you know what happens immediately when you're put into a classes with people who don't share that sort of outlook. Oh yes, yeah. Some again. That now listen. That's bad enough. You want to learn, and you're surrounded by people who absolutely have no interest in learning whatsoever, and will literally cause as much disruption as possible. Believe you me, I can list off every single person I've had problems with this, and who are I know exactly what a lot of them are up to right now, and for some reason I can't even fathom why, you know, they are in the positions they are in, and on the back of trying to put no effort into what they do. I really can't believe that. And let me know if you've ever known stuff like that as well, because it's a grossly unfair thing to happen. Believe you me. However, so back at about the middle of March, we were told again. What would happen is that it was based on, you know, like the 15 of us and stuff like that. Apparently, 10 of us were going to be going to Italy during like this half term and stuff like that. So they told us in the nicest part that it was going to be a lottery. Like 10 names would be drawn, and those 10 would be going. And so we sat there waiting, and then all 10 names were drawn, and I was not one of them. Now I know. Now listen. Let me just put it to you like this. I understand that there was probably 4 other people out there as well who also didn't get picked or anything like that. I understand that concept. Yeah, I get it. I'm not alone in that case. However, I'm not particularly sorry about the fact that I was upset. And I'll tell you why. Because that kind of, all that build-up, you play by the rules, you get your homework in on time, you put in the effort, you work like you've never worked before, and then somebody presents you under this fantastic opportunity, like some form of acknowledgement and achievement of everything you've done, and you go in there and they tell you, well, it all comes down to whether or not you get picked from in a straightforward lottery. Nothing to do based at this point on anything you've done. It's just if you get chosen, you get chosen. If you're not, you're not. So when all of that was done, and apparently there was still 20 minutes, this was during lunchtime as well, I don't know why, but I automatically just had this urge to just get up and leave. And I honestly do not know why. I don't know if it was just because everybody else, even those who didn't get chosen, stayed as well for whatever reason. I don't know why I stayed. I really don't. To be honest, it didn't seem worth it, and even to the people who did get drawn, some of them actually, you know what, were quite quite fair lads and stuff like that. Some of them, however, I don't really feel like that's it. It seemed a bit of an injustice, if I'm being honest. So anyway, what happened after this? Because after lunch was over, 4th lesson was RS. And I must be honest, I don't really remember any. I remember which classroom I was in, but I have absolutely no recollection of what the hell was going on in that lesson, because the only thing that worked into my mind And tell me if you probably know exactly what it is. The only thing that was going on in here was, what do you mean I wasn't chosen? But what else could I have done? You made me go through all that. I behave. I follow all the rules. Everything you berate everybody into telling them to follow the rules and stuff like that. And it means absolutely nothing in the end, because guess what? If you're not chosen and you're not going through, it's as simple as that. So it doesn't really seem as if like it was one of those moments where, and I'm sure we've kind of been through these sorts of things before, where everything that you were ever told, everything that you were ever taught to do and stuff like that, it seemed to be built on a foundation of efficacy and false beliefs. Yeah, that's pretty much exactly. It was one of those moments. And I kind of had this... it's hard to say exactly what compelled me to do the thing I did next, but it just kind of seemed that... I just couldn't face it. So with about 15 minutes to go before final period, I remember I just got up, I walked out of the classroom, and I kind of just gave 5 minutes to compose myself. I kind of tried to, if I was going to force the water out of my eyes, I rather would do it with nobody watching, or... And this is the thing I actually did. I tried to make up a story about why my eyes were starting to gloss and why it looked as if like I was kind of sick and stuff like that. I remember, and I went with this option because the RS teacher came out, and to be honest, he was kind of, because it was a very, very strange thing for me to do. It probably would have been even more awkward if like, where I was like, okay, so imagine here is the door to leave the classroom. My desk that I remember sitting with a lad called I think it was called Harrison, I think, at the top of my mind. Anyway, the door to leave the class was here. I was sat at a desk round about here, so it's like the first desk you look at before the door. So I remember I just kind of got up, didn't say anything, didn't look at anybody, and just walked out. And again, 5 minutes to compose. And it's not particularly that easy, because the way they designed the doors is that there was a little strip of like glass and stuff like that which you could actually see out of. But yeah, the RS teacher came out, and it was a strange thing, the RS teachers, because all of the RS staff were abnormally tall, and it seemed, I don't know, at the time, it was one of my long memories of when I was at school. The RS teachers were probably taller than all of the PE staff put together. There were some pretty short PE staff, I must admit. So I get out there. He asks us, Jim, you look, you don't quite look yourself. Are you okay? And I just explained how that I had these sort of like, I get these sort of like reactions and stuff like that when like cats walk past. And this was true, by the way. I did have like, I think it's like long hair cats and stuff like that. And I just kind of explained how I didn't want to like keep sneezing and just like couldn't stop like, you know, agitating my face or anything like that. So anyway, I get it sorted out, get back in, 5 minutes to go. I don't think I remember really saying anything to anybody else for like the final hour, because I'm pretty sure this was a Wednesday when this was happening, because I had chemistry last lesson of the day. And this is also the part of the story where it's a little bit awkward, because at the beginning of the year, the chemistry teacher I had, one of the absolute friendliest men you could ever hope to meet, and I think he caught on immediately to like the sort of person I was, because he said that he went to St. Mary's with my dad all the way back in the early 70s. Yeah, so if there was one man who could absolutely know something was not right, it was him, is what I'm trying to get at. And I must have been like this sort of like, this shining example of, well, when you can tell something's not right, you know exactly that if it's even something very slightly different, they're going to pick up on this, especially men like him. So, and I can't say anything bad about this man. He had a very well, I'm not going to say any more than that, but it's a terrible thing, basically. Anyway, so I crack on with chemistry. I just, again, I didn't say anything to anybody else. I just kind of cracked on. Yeah, and just did that, and I tried to. I think one of the things that people could. I think it wasn't maybe the chemistry teacher, but I think other people in my class kind of caught on that maybe something wasn't right, because there was plenty who were in my in my Italian class, but I also think it was down to the fact that I didn't make eye contact with anybody. I think that's possibly what people possibly suspected. That's what the issue was. And but if I'm also honest, with the sort of year I was having, I couldn't really work out one way or the other what else I could do. It's not exactly as if I could just, get up and walk out again. No, that's because again, the science department, it's literally just one long corridor with about 12 classrooms along each wall. There's pretty much nowhere to escape to, because like the lab we were in was at the very middle of the corridor. So yeah, nowhere to escape to, and just you stood out to anybody who was walking past. So the point of this story, and the reason why I'm bringing this up first, is because I know perfectly well like what like anguish and disappointment can bring out in somebody, because, and this was just one example of like a whole myriad of disasters very, very similar to this that happened from the very beginning of the year. And I think I handled things very, very badly, but it wasn't as if like I lashed out or anything like that, but it was kind of written all over my face. And yeah, it's honestly been one of those things I've never really got back from, because it's the sort of thing that comes, like, it manifests itself a level of disappointment like much, much later in life. Which kind of brings us up to where our story begins, because back in because the story the way we set up our story right now is 2015, and it's somewhere round about, I'm gonna say, the beginning of February. So I literally just turned 17 years old, and I had been struggling for a while now to get my head around my photography A levels, and it wasn't as if I tried intentionally to make a bad example of myself, but it was just one of those things where, try as I might, I couldn't work out exactly what was wanted, or rather what exactly else I could have done to improve the quality of the things. Like, I think it's a natural thing for like people who like start like something quite new, and you're gonna have to like make a lot of mistakes, and you just kind of, you're not really too sure where to start. And anyone who's ever had like mistakes with photography before will know immediately that it can be quite costly whenever you do make a mistake. And there were some disasters which bordered on devastating, but there were also many occasions in which, to be honest, I wish I could have just been anywhere else again. In fact, to be honest, I had a little manifestation of this, because a good friend of mine who I shared a lot of my classes with had a very, very serious mental breakdown, and I just so happened to find him, and I asked him, well, is there anything we can do or anything like that? He just told me to tell the person we were supposed to be seeing where he was and how he just kind of wanted a few minutes on his own and just to, again, just compose himself. And he was really in a bad way. In fact, and he dropped out of like several classes and stuff like that because I think he just kind of needed some space. And yeah, to be honest, I think a lot of us could have. And this was something I know far too well. It was even as far back when I was 12 years old, and I was just in my first year at school, in secondary school. And to be honest, there was like a period for about a month in which I missed quite a lot of classes, and I was like extremely like reluctant to go back because I didn't really want to be in any of those classes, just surrounded by, you know, certain people and stuff like that. It just felt a bit overwhelming at times, and I didn't really want to like think I could put myself. I tried my best to explain, you know, what issues I was having, and to be honest, their solution was just go back to those classes. That, to be honest, that was their solution to it. A solution that, to be honest, sticks in my memory because of something I was told many years later. Anyway, so yeah, certainly it was a lot of problems. I was struggling at school, and I was doing my best. You know, and I can only do my best in many such cases, and it seemed as if just try as I might, it seemed as if just, you know, things were starting to pile up, and it seemed as if it was becoming harder and harder to keep control of things. And then I heard my nan was dying. I didn't really need to be told. I wasn't told, you know, any like about her diagnosis, but it began the day when we had the Stannah stair lift installed. I remember when we got it installed and she used it, because she literally only used it once. Because then they made the decision that the best course of action was to have her living downstairs permanently. And I remember, like, so despite as hard as I thought, just this was like somewhere in April when this started to happen, and then, you know, I tried to just, you know, be there for my nan and be there for my mother, and because I cracked on in school. Here's where we get sort of. So I don't know what it was, but I just sort of cracked on in school. I still maintained to do the best I could. Yeah, year 12 basically just kind of came and went because at the time, if you do kind of feel like you're a little bit against the clock sometimes when you're caught in these situations, or when there's things happening outside of school that, to be honest, you can't really turn your eye away from. So yeah, I get through my AS levels, and then, well, I spent quite a lot of my summer that year, well, just anytime my mum needed to go to my nan's, I went with them and stuff like that, and I was trying to be as much help as I possibly could, and, you know, I thought it was just good to just be there for my nan and stuff like that. It seemed, because at the time I couldn't think of anything better to do. A few weeks before I finished year 12 for good, we suddenly got given a list of things that we were going to start studying in at the beginning of year 13, so back in September of that year. And we'll certainly come to those later. However, it just seemed like a good idea to get a bit of a head start, you know what I mean? I'm sure everybody did as well. However, yeah, what else can I say? That came second, because, you know, trying to, you know, be there for a family relative, that was my top priority, and I don't really think they could have blamed me for thinking anything else. So I was there for my nan, and we just kind of, we tried to make things as comfortable as we could. And I think about, well, to be honest, it was also there was also something very particular that happened at about the second week of like summer holidays. So it was just about the almost the end of July, and that was I was on my NCS course. Now, future generations probably won't know because, well, apparently in 2025 they did the very last NCS course because apparently it got scrapped. But what these courses were for, it was essentially to give some people some like outside experience in terms of. In fact, to be honest, I'm not really too sure what like the main objectives were, because my highlights from stuff like this were getting to know a few new people, I suppose. I got my first a certificate in first aid, which is good because I think I've used it maybe all of 3 times in 10 years. You know, it's not exactly as if the patient would have said, "Hang on, are you qualified?" And stuff like that. Brilliant, double standards, especially if you're trying to perform CPR. Thankfully, I've never had to perform CPR on somebody because, well, you worry if you make one mistake, it could be like that's it, and well, could you have blood on your hands if CPR goes wrong? I don't know about that. I really don't know. I don't really want to find that out either. So yeah, it's. And let me just tell you, I'm just going to say this straight about the NCS. The way they advertised it, the way they presented it, all the way back in September of 2014, if I'm being honest, I didn't want to do it. I really, really, really did not want to do it. And throughout that year, I must admit, the powers that be, they were, "Oh, go on, Jim. Go on, Jim. Yeah, go on, Jim. Yeah, Jim, what? Go on. Jim, why do you not want to go?" They were just... They would not take no for an answer. And let me just say to you right now, it's a good thing I was the person I was when I was 17. Because if they had asked me at 27 if I would do it, and I said no, and they continued to not take no for an answer, I literally would throw a fit. Because I could not think of anything more degrading, anything more infuriating than the thought of me saying to somebody categorically, "I do not want to go on this course, I do not like the look of it," and then somebody else completely disacknowledging everything I've said until I eventually acquiesced and capitulated, and I went during the summer of 2015. I know it's a... Because, now listen, if you've seen my videos before, you probably caught on to the idea that, actually, I don't really like people. And you can see exactly, you know what, that it's the sort of thing that brings out. I really, really do not like people. I don't like the idea of forced association, because as I mentioned before, if you don't want to do something, it doesn't matter if people continue to badger you and stuff like that. If your heart's not into it and you've categorically said no, and bear in mind, I had enough to deal with, about my nan's declining health. What made anybody in their right mind think for 1 second that they were absolutely going to start, changing their minds? It's the nerve of some people. And listen, I get it. I think they were trying to do good, and they were trying to make me see, the benefits of stuff like this. However, again, but I also think it was just one of those things where they could turn around and showcase to their employers, their managers, "We managed to get all the people for this." Yeah, to be honest, if looking back on it now, I really should have I should have put both feet down and possibly have pinned somebody to the ground and told them categorically, the answer is no, I am not doing it. because I've had a long history of people doing that sort of thing to me, and and if I continue going through life like this, I literally am, like I said, I'll throw a fit. I'll literally throw stuff at the walls. I'll smash the place up just to get people to leave me alone, because I am not going to start doing things that are egregiously outside of, my own parameters, or even, I keep saying there's two types of people in life: those who can't or won't, and those who can and do. However, what benefits do I gain from this sort of excursion, these 3 weeks? I know, again, that's just, it's the sort of thing you always hear, but I generally do want to know, because it wasn't exactly as if I was a child. I was 17, you know what I mean? And not quite a man, but at the same time, you know what? You can't just pull the wool over my eyes and think that I'm just going to believe that. So by the time, because the very first day, I think we were somewhere in Byker was like the first. I know that for the first week we had to go to some sort of lodge somewhere in Durham for a week. But the first day, I'm gonna say, before we went away for this lodge for a week, we were all gathered together, and we were all divided into like 4 groups and stuff like that. Well, I think it was like about 12 people per group, and the proportion was that in the group that I was in, there was 8 girls and 4 boys. Myself, a guy who I think he had some form of ADHD, because he was a fanatic when it comes to things like DJing and stuff like that. Absolute chatterbox, to say the least. But you know what? At least he sounded happy to be there. Another kid, he was like much older than the rest of us. And I think it was just, he had like, I really don't know what the nicest way to say it or anything like that, but he had like, I think it was, I don't know if it was like locked. It's not really locked in, but it was a sort of thing where he knew, I think, 10 words in his vocabulary, and he went back and forth with a lot of them. And he a really nice guy. Don't get me wrong. It's just, it made me wonder what exactly, how did they manage to get him onto the course, or rather, did he agree to it and not fully understand, or one of those things, because he was on his own, and I think I know his legal guardians, his parents basically, certainly were there for like a good number of weeks afterwards and stuff like that, even when we all received our awards. And the only other guy who was on this in the group of ours, to be honest, I think he was just trying to. He was. I think on the outside he was a lot like me on the inside. He was somebody who just kind of said, "Let's just get this over with." And to be honest, that was what was going through my mind. Let's just get this over with. And it's as sad as it is. I absolutely understood. Because I probably inside I felt the exact same way. What are we doing here? We didn't really want to do this, but let's just get this over with. So, like, the first week we went to this, which is funny because I remember actually I quite liked a lot of the people who were on the course and stuff like that, who were in the other groups. Everybody just kind of talked, it was there was stuff we got up to and stuff like that, but to be honest, I would rather not have been there, if I'm honest. And the second week, we were at this community centre in Byker somewhere. It was somewhere, because I wasn't particularly like used to like going all the way to like likes of Byker or Walkergate or Wallsend before and stuff like that. Did stuff over there. And then on the third week, it was one of those ones where actually we didn't have to like stay anywhere for a week, because we were driven we went to Wallsend and stuff like that, and we had to get on with activities and stuff like that. Apparently what we got up to, we ran some sort of like store. I can't really remember what it was we even did for the last day, but apparently somebody on our group actually knew a certain somebody because we actually got the mayor to come down. I honestly have. I wish I had a better memory of it, but I do remember one other thing. I drew the short straw and I had to wear this enormous like dog mascot suit. I remember it because it was the middle of summer, blazing hot, and this thing was about 50 degrees inside. I literally thought I needed to like, I was either going to like sweat myself to death, or I was just going to collapse on the ground and some kids was just going to stand around and kick me or something like that. Yeah, so not exactly what I would describe as the sort of 3 weeks. That seemed a lot. Yeah, that seemed a lot more important than we're spending time with one of my relatives who was losing a battle to cancer. Yeah, absolutely. I know, right? I know. It's just what else? I don't know how I'm supposed to put it any other way than that. I couldn't think of any other way. Right, so because here's the thing, only about literally about 24 hours after the final day, we went on a 2-week holiday to somewhere in somewhere like that in Turkey. I honestly don't remember where it was. It was a nice enough place. The hotel was good. The weather was glorious. But it was also one of those things where I kind of felt like those sort of all-inclusive holidays where I think we were sort of getting to that stage of where I was kind of just falling out of love with these sorts of holidays. And I don't quite know why. Actually, I think I do know why it was. It was just because, well, it was just like the others and stuff like that. And personally, I would rather have gone back to the Kusta Club and stuff like that because the grounds there are probably the most beautiful in all of Turkey. The view over the ocean is stunning. And nice place, don't get me wrong. It's just you think you're just sort of at that age. Should consider myself lucky, and I really do consider myself lucky that my family get to go on those when we were like teenagers. We went to those sorts of places. Yeah, we couldn't. I couldn't put it any other way than that. It was a tremendous experience, to say the least. And I still thank me parents and stuff like that for that sort of thing to this day, because again, of course, that's just the right thing to do, in my opinion. Anyway, so I also spent quite a lot of this holiday reading a lot of the material that I was going to have to be quizzed on for my A-levels. In particular, Frankenstein, The Bloody Chamber, and Dr. Faustus. Because even for those who ever had to study English literature for A-level from 2015 to 16, it was the Gothic is what we were doing. And I still have my copies of Frankenstein, Bloody Chamber, and Dr. Faustus to this very day, and they sit very comfortably on my shelves. And it's strange because literally, even actually, since I mentioned the holiday, I remember when I was reading about like the first 100 pages when I was on the plane to Trunky. We're just going to call it Trunky for expediency. After about like the third page, I overhear something in the corner of my ear, and it was "Lord behave, Lord behave, Lord behave," like a very very butch voice. I look over my shoulder. It's like this family of 4 people who I'm going to this kid, Luke. He looked about like 10 years old, and his sister Lily. She looked about 7. I'm gonna guess at. And they had the mother was there, and I'm pretty sure her mother was already there. And the nan literally had one of the most manliest voices I think you could put. It sounded like she was putting on a voice, you know what I mean? I'm pretty sure they were either from either Middlesbrough or possibly a little bit further down south, maybe Hull or Leeds. But, it literally was, Lord behave, Lord behave. I have no idea what Luke was doing, by the way, for the Nan to keep going like that. And then literally it switched up. It went, Lord, if you don't behave, I'm going to send you back to your father in a box. And this happened, and then it became, Lily, 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 if you don't stop crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. How long was the plane journey? 4 hours. And this carried on without, there was not a period of 10 minutes throughout that entire plane journey that this did not have, that this carried on. I have no idea what that Luke must have done to have caused the Nan to be like that. Or what even the hell Lily must have been doing, because it literally was like... It's like if Fred Dibner, if he was still alive, he was telling his kids off. So, yeah, 4 hours, and when you think about it, Luke and Lily, they must have been, if they're here now, they would have been at least 20 and at least 17 years old. Good Lord. And the Nan is still probably doing it. She probably rehearses it in her sleep. Lord behave. Lord behave. And this was the Nan. I have no idea what the man must have been doing. Probably trying to sleep. I do not know how she managed to do it, or maybe if she... I don't have any idea. But yeah. Lily, if you don't stop crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. By the time we finally touched down at... I think it was at Celebi Airport and stuff like that. It's just one of those things you pick up on. Everybody on the plane kind of was just scrambling, if you will, to get off the plane because we were closer, we were about 4 rows ahead. Maybe there was something even worse going on up ahead. I couldn't tell you, but oh boy. Dear me. And they did it on the way back as well, but that's need I say more? So, yeah. The holiday was, again, just alright, I suppose, as far as holidays went. I kind of had a little bit of, quite a lot of things on my mind and stuff like that about how, what my application for university was possibly... I wasn't necessarily sure, because I didn't really have any ideas about what I was going to do in the future or anything like that. I kind of had an idea about the road I wanted to go down, but it just didn't quite manifest itself yet. Which, I know it's probably not the best idea in the world, but I had enough to think about already, and sometimes when you're caught up in the moment, it's a little bit hard to, look ahead, you know what I mean? Anyway, so... As be the fashion, I did make a couple of friends and stuff like that when I was out there, and we just you just do what, just young people do, and they just, if there was a pool, we just go and swim in it. If there was, those giant water slides, which I still love those things to this day, you just play around and you just have fun, because you know what, why not? It's just, why not have fun? It's just, you only have one life, you enjoy it, and you enjoy it however you can. So, yeah, just went through all this, tried to have as much, got as much out of it as I could. But by the time we got back home, it was my nan's health really was it was looking, pretty, so. By the time we get down and stuff like that, here is sort of just how actually the 10 years ago, here's how it actually really begins. Because it begins, of course, literally the moment we got off the plane. Because school, I would be starting school again in about 4 days' time. So I get home, I start getting myself prepared for... Because you get the opportunity before you start your A-levels properly, if you want to drop a subject you were learning and stuff like that, and you want to carry on with the rest you were doing. So I agreed to drop applied art, so it means that I was doing fine art, English literature, and photography for A-level. It just seemed as if like having one less thing to worry about at the time. And we get called into this assembly and stuff. I had already grown out a bit of a mustache and a smallish beard during my time away from school. I got told, you know, it had to go and stuff like that, despite the fact that there were plenty of other, you know, guys my age who were already rocking it and stuff like that. But whatever, that's just whatever. And I just, you know, off it went. And you can tell I've literally struggled like hell to grow a better one or anything even slightly convincing ever since. Actually, before we go any further again, I haven't even really explained anything about when I was during my time at sixth form anyway. So I figure, you know what, let's get into it. How many of you guys out there have ever watched a little-known program called The Inbetweeners? There's no point in raising your hands. I can't see anything. However, there's just this much to be said. You know Greg Davis, who plays Mr. Gilbert. Well, you know how he's like, you know, he is like yay high, and he is just he has the most deadpan, I couldn't give a shit about anything that goes on and stuff like that. And you know what? You know what that's like, don't you? I mention this because let me tell you something a little bit about the head of sixth form at where I was at. And for the sake of this video and for the sake of his I'm pretty sure he's retired now, but let me put it to you like this. We're just going to call him Andy for the sake of this video. We're just going to call him Andy. We were first introduced to Andy about like the final few days of when I was in year 11 back in 2014. Let me tell you something right now about Andy. He's bigger than Greg Davies. And Greg Davies is certainly one of the biggest men in Britain, like just size, you know, everything. Like Andy was even bigger than that, and I think he was even more deadpan than Mr. Gilbert. The very first thing he told us, no word of a lie, the very first thing he told us was he's been the head of this sixth form since 1997. In other words, I've been here longer than any one of you has ever been alive. And this was true, by the way. It literally was. The youngest couldn't have been born anywhere before September 1997. But yeah, I'm not kidding. That is literally the first thing he told us. And I almost automatically thought there was gonna be some sort of rumor that one of us somehow was a secret love child. Thankfully, this never happened, and nobody made any sort of mention of it whatsoever. But at the same time, I also thought that's a very, very specific way to make an introduction. Good Lord. Anyway, so yeah, and here's the thing: he absolutely, because one thing you don't seem to appreciate is that when you're that tall, if he catches anything. He will catch absolutely anything that happens out of the ordinary. He will snipe you, and you literally, and everyone will know it was you. And this happened when I first day of year 13, and we all had like some sort of assembly in the common room. One person, H, we're gonna call for the sake of this video as well. I'm gonna have to keep track of the amount of, you know, pseudonyms and just false names and stuff like that. Because I still know to this day everybody who was in my year group when all the way through school. I honestly I remembered everybody, and he literally was like, if you come in late tomorrow, H, you're not coming back. H had a little bit of a reputation anyway. He's a bit of a rebel anyway, but. Yeah, honestly, they were not pulling any punches. They knew absolutely who they were keeping their eyes on. Which is ironic, really, because H was in my photography class, and he was all right, I suppose, as far as guys go. Perhaps. He was also really good friends with somebody I knew from the very first day I started secondary school called Bakewell. And they I don't know, they sort of just how personalities sort of gravitate towards each other. It just was sort of one of those ways. Anyway, so mind you, with that being said, speaking of my classes and stuff like that, let's get into it. I think actually I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a short 10-minute break just to sweat it all out and just let it all loose, and then we'll continue for what I'm going to describe as part 2, where I can actually describe a little bit more about what my time in sixth form was like the year prior, and a bit of what's going on right now. So back again for part 2. Hello again, and welcome back to part 2. So we're going to kick off right where we left off, and we talked. It was a little bit more about sort of what my time in sixth form actually was like. Now, because we kind of of course, everyone knows that when you go from year 11 and if you go on to sixth form, then it also means that not everybody is going to make the transfer over to sixth form, because technically that's when they start really start to treat you as adults, more or less. Sometimes not really, because of course in the eyes of the law you're technically still a child until you turn about 18. But the point I'm trying to make was that we kind of felt a little bit more like adults, because was it because of the new uniforms we got to wear? Of course, it was all black. Striped tie. It went from black, white, red, black, red. Anyone who see sixth form ties will know immediately. Blue short sleeve shirt, black blazer, black trousers, and stuff like that. It was just sort of everybody kind of felt a little bit older. They felt you stood out amongst everybody else who were wearing maroon blazers, to say the least. Anyway, speaking about standing out, I think there was about in total about 2 new kids who actually transferred over to our sixth form. One of them I don't particularly think stayed around for the first year. One of the new kids, however, was probably. I mean, I'm gonna call this guy Mitt, because it seemed just about the only thing I could call him. The only other comparison would have been calling him Mitt Morrison, because he straight up looked like he could have been a member of the Doors, if you know what I mean. He was. I described Mitt as being quite tall, quite very Harry Styles styled hair. If it was a lot if it was a lot darker, brunette basically is the way I would. It took me forever to get that out, and he kind of he was in a lot of my classes, mostly for art and stuff like that. But he also just kind of looked like one of those guys where he looked even more introverted than me, is to say the least. He would sort of stand, try to just have his hands in his pockets. Because he was quite tall, he even had to keep bending up and stuff because he just sort of looked like he would just listen to what he needed to hear and then just sort of go back into his own thoughts. We actually got along really, really well, because he knew that I had a sister, and they mean it in the nicest possible way, because Mitt would say, you know, is that really your sister? And my sister would also go, is that, do you know who that Mitt is, or anything like that? Which is funny enough, because it was right about this time in September of 2015 is when my sister met her now fiance Jack whilst they were like working in the Blackbird. I'm sure that's how they met. The more I think about it, it must have been along those circumstances at any rate. So yeah, it was that was obviously never going to go anywhere. Meanwhile, it was just I don't know, just quite a lot of the people that I shared me fine art classes with, and we just sort of like we knuckled down and we got on with it. But we also we just had one of those things where we could just, you know, we could do fine art and just sort of like talk very casually about just, you know, the kind of bullshit that just sort of, the kind of thing that doesn't really mean anything, but you know what, it's just kind of fun, if you will. And it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't, however, the most laid back, however, because there was still plenty to do. And I will always say, I have always said that I always just grafted and stuff like that when I was either in or out of school. And yeah, we just kind of knuckled down and got on with stuff. And September was sort of, it was mad, because it was one of those times where you just sort of, I was flying by the seat of my pants, trying to cram as much into my day as possible so I could sleep well enough before the next day would begin. Chiefly because I actually started going to the gym like after school all throughout September and October. And again, it was just a way just to relieve a little bit of pressure and a little bit of stress, because there was a lot of things that was now starting to go on in my life, both in and out of school. So yeah, it was just a way of just trying to like keep our minds off things and just trying to make the most out of what was going on, because it seemed nigh on impossible to ignore anything else really, or to start causing unnecessary grief and just no reason. I mentioned this because September was just, we went by and it went by, and then we had them. I think it was on a Monday morning is when we got given the bad news. And I remember that it was like 2 days ago was when I actually went to see my nan. We all went to see our nan for, well, basically the last time. She was sort of just sleeping, more or less, and she seemed at peace, if that's the way to put it. I certainly know that probably in other moments, my mum was probably, it was an enormous pressure to take. However, we all stood by her, and we all stood by the rest of our family, as you're supposed to do. Like my uncle and my auntie and stuff. We stood by each other throughout this rather difficult period, which is interesting because when we did get given the news on Monday morning, it wasn't necessarily like it wasn't that I wasn't sad or anything like that, but it was in some small way a consolation that she was now no longer suffering, if that makes sense. And I certainly know in many ways that, well, it was sort of how it was. It couldn't have been any other way. So yeah, it was because by the time we actually had the funeral, about a week, like that following week and stuff like that, it was the first funeral I'd ever been to in my life. In fact, actually, the events of this are actually pretty interesting, if I do say so myself. For starters, it was because the house that my nan had lived in, she'd lived there since at least, if memory serves me correct, the late 70s. They moved into it because my mum was 10 years old. No, okay, so it must have been 1973 then, because my mum was only 10 years old when they moved into that house, including my granddad Tom. My granddad Tom died when I was about, I think, 5 years old. I think somewhere around about that time. Yeah. Served in the army and all that. You know what I mean? Right. Anyway, so where was I? Yes, when we had this occasion, because I was given the task of, I think, actually reading the eulogy, which is usually something that's actually reserved for, I think, the eldest child to do. But I think they had a word, and for some reason they selected me to do it, which it did seem a bit of an odd choice. However, I think they because there were relatives, you know, on my mother's side who were older than me anyway, who probably could have done it. However, they decided it was for me, and anyway, the point I'm trying to get is that the house that my nan lived in, it was for on the day of the funeral, I was at that house for literally the very last time in Westerhope was where it was. So yeah, it was strange because already they were starting to make arrangements to empty the house and put it on the market. I think it was just because I think my mum took all of that week off work because she and my uncle and auntie, they had to like start discussing about what we're going to do about the house, and you know, just the things you do, you know what I mean? Because obviously they had to sell it on, you know what I mean? Put it on the market. I also remember like the bizarre feeling that when we all got into the cars outside, like everybody else on the street, because the street that my nan lived on, it was sort of a little bit like a residential sort of little community, because there was a lot of elderly people who lived from street to street, and you could see quite a lot of them were actually out the windows, you know, crossing themselves as we were all getting into the cars. And when we got to the crematorium on the West Road, it's actually very, very close to my school. The priest who took the service, he was somebody that we've known for many, many years, and he was very, very dignified, and it was a very no. The entire the process was very, very dignified, and it must be said, everyone who attended, including you know, friends of my nan and stuff like that, and you know, extended family who I don't even think I've even seen to this day. A lot of people were there, and they just it was a very, very nice I know it sounds a bit just like it was the only way I could put it, because the thing was that about 4 years later, I went to my second funeral. My eldest cousin passed away from something very similar to my nan. I won't go into any further details, but it was I didn't necessarily grieve, if that's the correct way, only because, well, the second funeral was a little bit different, because it was a shock, but at the same time, those who knew her better than I did, I suppose, could testify that what happened was appalling, because a lot, yeah, stuff like that. Anyway, the point was that I did the eulogy. I was commended because I did it with such a great meaning of dignity and respect, which I know fine well my nan would have absolutely have loved to see. So yeah, it was just it was a very straight. I know, even at 17, and for that to be only my first funeral, and the fact that she wouldn't be able to see me, like, you know, with my A levels or go on to university, would have been, I'm sure she would have loved it. And I think in some way, hopefully, just it's some consolation that she's probably in a better place right now, probably better than when she was approaching the end of her life. The only other things I want to say about my nan, for what it's worth, she was born, I believe, November 17th. I think it was like I think it was like December 4th or never, somewhere around about that time. She was born December 4th, 1930. She passed away at aged 84 years of age. She would have been coming up to 95 this year. She worked as a secretary for many years. I think met my dad, my granddad on the buses, because when my granddad came out of the army, he was he worked as I think it was a bus conductor and a ticket inspector. He did quite a lot of things on the buses, and they first had my auntie, currently aged 73 as of the recording of this video, and then along came my uncle and my own mother, who was the youngest. And for what it was worth, my mom was born in 1963, and all three of them are still with us, and that's something. With my auntie being the eldest, nearly approaching her mid-70s, and though curiously enough, I suppose one other thing I just want to add before we move past this is that my uncle, who's been retired for quite a long time now, you're never going to guess what he was doing during his formative years. He was doing exactly what I'm training myself, what I'm training to be doing, railway service engineer. That's interesting. I must still have a word with him about stuff like that, if there's anything at all, because I think it's also about, who you know and stuff like that. Every cloud and all that. So anyway, going into like the second half of October, and I was still throwing my weight around, just trying to work and just try to get on with things, but I was also getting to that age where, to be honest, I also wanted to see a lot of go outside a lot more than just going to the gym. I actually wanted to go on nights out and go on parties and stuff like that, because I keep seeing a lot of people going to parties, and I see a lot of people going and spending times with girls and stuff like that, and well, to put it lightly, they're gonna go out and get pissed, basically. And for some, I couldn't think of why at the time, but I kind of just I wanted to be amongst them, because they seemed to make it out as though it was the absolute greatest thing in the world, and I never really had that kind of like experience or anything like that, and I kind of just, it wasn't necessarily about, getting bladdered or anything like that, or being seen with girls. It was just like being amongst other people and stuff like that. And I kind of remember having this little bit of a fallout with my parents about wanting to go and stuff like that, and it didn't really work out that way. So yeah, I kind of did hit a little bit rock bottom, because as much as I was working and trying to deal with things and not really sure whether or not like any of the universities I'd applied for were gonna, because you also hear every other direction, people got 5 offers unconditional from like universities, and because I was now starting to consider where I was going next. I can tell you exactly what I was applying for as well. I wanted to work in animation. I wanted to become an animator and start making my own shows and get them on the telly and stuff like that. And I remember I was applying for East Anglia. I think it was it wasn't East Anglia Polytechnic. It was. I think it was more about somewhere it was in Cambridgeshire anyway, and it wasn't a Cambridge-based university, but it was in Cambridgeshire. Then I also applied for UCL, in a very prestigious art department. I also applied for Leeds Beckett, and finally I also applied for Northumbria University because, of course, it's quite local, and they do often make a habit of saying apply for something local because it's very, very difficult to get to get placements in any other city. So we go through that, and I remember when, during about the middle of November, when I was escorted down to Cambridgeshire, and I remember the conversations and the fun I was having about sharing about the love about what I was wanting to do, and it was a nice, pleasant sort of, and we got talking a little bit about art and stuff like that, and they still said no, by the way, and I must admit, even during those sorts of times, being told no, it still hurts. And I think just being told no, it hurts people no matter how old you are. But yeah, it for some reason, it didn't seem to take long for a lot of the offers to come back and to say no. But before we get into the ones that did say yes, November had arrived, and I'm actually gonna go onto my calendar, if you will, and see if we can scroll back a little bit all the way to 2015, because I'm absolutely convinced I can tell you exactly where it was when it happened. Sunday the 8th of November 2015. I can tell you Veterans Day for the US, for the Americans. Let me tell you a story about what happened specifically on that date. I remember just having my photography stuff laid out for the last about month and a half, because I'd chosen architecture and whatnot to be a little bit of a focal point for my studies. So I would spend a lot of time after school and sometimes on the weekends going all the way across Newcastle, taking photos of stuff like that. I've even still got my sketchbook, if you will, for the things I was up to and stuff like that, just underneath my bed, tucked away as a little bit of a treasure, if you will. And I remember during all this time, I felt that I wasn't going to be getting any further with what I was doing and being so miserable with myself. So through whatever reason, and I don't really know how it became this way, I just had this. Once I started working, it was impossible to stop working, and all throughout the next couple of months, and this was even something that started all the way at the very beginning of September of that year. Once I got into school, I would literally go straight to the labs and stuff like that where I did a lot of my work, and immediately start getting to work, just doing anything with arts and stuff like that, writing up things for photography, doing research. I would literally, the day didn't start at 9 o'clock, it started at 20 past 8 in the morning, and I scrambled, I worked. Sometimes I would possibly even just not go to registration because, quite frankly, I was too focused on just trying to get things done. And I did react a little bit badly when they say that when they were starting to tell me off about not going to registration because I was too concerned about just trying to get my work done. It's a bizarre feeling, because all I was trying to do was just get on with work and just do what I've actually come to school to do. And then you feel like I'm getting punished for these sorts of things. It was just one of those things there was enough going on right now, and it didn't really seem fair that now they're starting to try to dictate to me, where I can find the time to actually start doing stuff. I think it was also because that on that particular, because it was something, the reason why I even started the craze of outside of just trying to start work early, because I literally interpreted it as from September all the way till June, this will be my last couple of months in this school. So I immediately thought to myself, you know what? Therefore, we're going to make them last. And we've got to make the most of them. And it's like one of those silent things that you always, and I do mean always, consider at the back of your mind. You really do feel as if, like, if you don't, then that's it. You're not going to get another chance. So, therefore, you've got to make everything count. And I'm not entirely sure whether or not other people agree with me in this theory, but it's certainly seemed that way, because despite hard trying and trying to put in put the effort in, I didn't really. There were days where just straight up I didn't think that they cared one way or the other whether or not I actually succeeded. A dreadful thing, and let's not beat around the bush. That it's a dreadful mentality when you think the whole world is against you, and despite you literally trying to, realizing, there's a spots at university are literally on the line, you're still having to. It's like I'd spend pretty much my whole life, if you will, playing by their rules, and I didn't exactly know what I was just trying to make a good thing out of what time I had left. And you know what? I'd heard it all before, that, your teachers are not your mates and stuff like that. All right, I get it. I'm not trying to dispute that. Why can't I just be allowed to just get on with, with my life and stuff? Because, like I said before, I didn't go to parties. I didn't do any of that stuff. Literally, if I didn't go to school at all, I would literally be stuck indoors all day long. Like, just cut me I just want to be cut a little bit of slack sometimes, and I still feel that way to this day with just we're amongst people I just don't really want to mention as of now, but you know what? It's called give and take, and some people literally will just take. And when I say take, I'm talking about things more precious and more valuable than money. I'm talking about time, and time is short, and time is incredibly precious, and I don't really know what else I'm meant to say apart from that. It's a pain in the arse, to say the least. However, by the time, I kind of had a little bit of a confrontation with one of my teachers and stuff like that about why I still wasn't going to registration, and after I kept explaining about why, and I thought they would be at least appreciative of the fact that, I'm getting on with things and getting on and doing it. And when they had a sort of a meeting, if you will, with me, just to understand, they kind of made it out as that it didn't really matter, I still had to go and stuff like that. It was just, again, one of those things where, and I still don't really believe I did anything wrong to this day. It's just, what? Well, what do they think wasn't going to happen anyway if I didn't get on with it and worked? For all they give about, it's trying to put my thoughts together it's a hard one, because, well, what more do people want from me anyway? And what does anybody actually really want? The more I think, the more I phrase it. Anyway, whatever. I continue working. I very begrudgingly did as they asked. Whatever, I guess. I got on with it. Went to registration. Most of the time I feel like registration was just a complete waste of half an hour anyway. And half an hour I could be actually working and stuff like that. Anyway, so once all of this was over, and I when November was setting in and stuff like that, I remember having some of the best times of my life just working, because I felt content with the fact that I was just getting on with it and just doing what I needed to be done. for the most part, like, I can't really remember if anybody was ever really surprised, or rather, they seemed like that concerned, if you will. But, what else can I say? I didn't really know what else I was meant to do. And I didn't really think about telling anybody any of this, because quite frankly, trying to have sometimes I think trying to have conversations with people, it sometimes it only amounts to what somebody else wants, like going on a course I had no interest in doing. And well, if you don't, then we will just press the issue further until you finally just say yes and we can get on with it. So here I was, like, being probably the most industrious I'd been, at least throughout my entire life to that point, all throughout the month of November. And, well, what else can I say? It was an incredibly satisfying experience because of what I personally got out of it. I was busting my arse off. I was just everywhere and anywhere at once, working, editing, doing stuff like that. And it just seemed to work up until the point when it's hard to say a little bit about like some other issues I had with like members of staff, because you know how when you lay out exactly what you're interested in and what you're trying to do, and you say the reason why I want to go to university is to do, you know, this and that, but you also get the, you know, when you have the feeling when, you know, people just aren't listening to you, and it just seems like a bit of a waste of time to start trying to convince people, you know, you're not who are going to listen or take you seriously. There were many such moments like that. However, I am prepared to say, despite this slightly laxing sort of attitude, I just kind of, well, got on with it. And you know what? Despite that, some days did feel a little bit disparaging, on the back that despite how much I worked, nobody really seems like surprised or interested. I still got on with it because it meant more to me personally, and the experience of actually being surrounded by people I had actually started to actually, you know, call my friends. It was gratifying and, you know, satisfying knowing that we were starting to actually bond and have a little bit more things in common. And because I've said before, you know, I have like tremendous difficulty forming bonds with people, because you know, when I was mentioning the thing about the NCS and stuff like that, and how sometimes they try and rope people in by saying you're going to make friends for life and stuff like that. I didn't believe that like heart was in it, but again, if your heart's not in it, then it doesn't matter how you're going to try and sell it. If they're not interested, it's very, very difficult. And that level of trust takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to commit to. And if it's... I'm not going to say that a lot of people who probably should have known better didn't really have my best interest at heart. But what I am going to say is that, looking back on it, I think there were quite a lot of people who probably should have should have known better than some of the decisions that were made. I'm actually just going to say this now, and I'll probably reference this again later. Many years later, I heard from a certain person that actually, the more they thought about it, knowing what they know about me and stuff like that, that the school that I went to from 2009 to 2016, it probably was not the right school for me. It was also one of those moments where you feel as if, you know, everything that you've been told and told to believe in, it seemed to be built on a foundation of efficacy and moral ambiguity. if you will. And there were, like, again, many such occasions where this just seemed to be the thing. Fortunately, if that was going to be if that was what the problem was some of the time, that when they actually did get things right, and when I actually did get to know people who actually, including many of my friends, there were many friends I made during my time at school, and absolutely when I was in sixth form, when they got to know me more and understand, probably more just through getting to know me, and they could just see how things play out. I think they could also work out that actually that there were some things that probably just were not suitable, to say the least. Because there were some times I was quite vocal in terms of, well, my opinions, and I still am to this day. It's just when I was in school, I think more of them were heard more often than not. But when they weren't, it could become incredibly frustrating, and that's been one of the saddest things that was brought about throughout the month of November, is that despite me getting on with it, working hard, trying to still, stay in line and just make the most of what time I had left, I just got the impression from other people that, including, the powers that be, that, okay, so what? Which is, it's a terrible thing to say, and it's a terrible way to think of it, but I'm not entirely sure what else, how else I can put it. It's a terrible way to say it, but you know what? As I've said before, there's probably umpteen many people right now going through A-levels who probably also feel like they're getting by, but they also feel like they're getting no recognition. And you could feel this dilemma, if you will, on the back of when, the letters from other universities were coming, and they said, thank you so much for your application to East Anglia or to Leeds Beckett, but but unfortunately you've been deemed unsuccessful. Rejection is it at times is an absolutely dreadful come down, to say the least. And because out of all 5 universities I applied for, I was only ever given an offer for one of them, and that was for Northumbria University. And to be honest, the less said about my time at university, probably the better. Long story short, I deeply regretted my time at university. It was 3 years of hell, basically, and I can't help but think I came out of it worse than you could possibly imagine. That place took everything from me. Anyway, but of course I didn't know that at the time. And I remember it was like November 5th that I got my email saying that Northumbria had given me an offer. It seemed like they were the sort of people who probably they could understand and empathize better than maybe some other people who didn't know me or knew me better and stuff like that. So I remember when I went to the common room and stuff like that, and you could see, like, I looked like the happiest man who ever lived, and everybody was like, oh, okay, oh, quick, cool, you got in, that's tremendous, that is. So that was the sort of, when the pressure was on again, the pressure to do well, to get on with it, and, well, because now there really was something on the line for not only doing well, and I thought them at university would probably understand that they would be able to appreciate my heart, my graft, my character, and my personality. They didn't in the end, as I found out the hard way. Still, We just it was something to work for. So November, December, all that time went by. December was a bit of an interesting period because my family had actually booked a 2-week holiday across the Caribbean. We were meant to leave to go to Manchester International to get a flight all the way to Kingston. Yeah, I think it was meant to be on the 22nd. I think we were meant to leave. So literally, I was meant to finish school, and then about 3 hours later, we were meant to head all the way, because the build up to all that was the only thing I could think about all the way throughout December. Because to be honest, I didn't really realize or knew anything about this until the beginning of December. Apparently, I think I may have heard right that this was something that apparently my nan had put in place for us to spend a fortnight in the Caribbean. If I'm wrong about that, I'll make sure to, straighten these things out. But if it is, then you know what? It just gave me another excuse to keep working, because you know what? If I was going to earn this place at university, then you know what? I was going to earn it knowing that I was given every single support from my family, whether they were on this earth or looking down from up there. It meant a great deal to me that I had to do well, probably for the sake of her pride and for the sake of my dignity, if you will. Anyway, so grind, work hard. English classes were going well. I had a really good kick out of doing my studies for for likes of Angela Carter, and especially for Frankenstein. And also a little bit of a curious little tidbit, I may as well put it, is that one of the things you're supposed to do when you're doing your English A-levels is that you had to pick like an original work completely off your own back, and you're supposed to do an essay, like an essay or something like that, based on the subject matter you did it. And because it was just something I had a little bit of interest in the time, I actually did want to write an essay about transgender studies. The only problem with this, however, this was all back in 2015. I think I picked probably the worst book probably out there that I probably could have done this study on. I think it was something about I think I titled it the relations between sexual politics and the integration into human society based on the representation of transgenderism in the novel The Art of Being Normal by Lisa Williamson. I said that this was probably the worst book I could have probably have chosen because, for those who don't know, The Art of Being Normal is about two transgender high school students, one who is already transitioned to being a boy, and a guy who wants to transition into being a girl, and they don't really, and the lad who wants to be a girl has no idea how he's meant to break it to his parents, because he comes from a very affluent family, and the boy who was originally a girl comes from a very poverty-stricken family. And so the problem with trying to discuss this is that I feel like the book doesn't really say anything about transgenderism. It more speaks about difference, if you will, or rather the perception of difference. I think that's more, what Lisa Williamson, I think she was going for, as opposed to transgenderism, because sadly, it's one of those things where the big staying point, if you will, of transgender, it doesn't really play into the story outside of being a point of contention in how it seems to break up families, if you will. And as a result, the book kind of, if you will, reads more like a 6-part CBBC drama, as opposed to being a work discussing about things like sexual politics, or again, like the integration between transgenderism and the look on society and stuff like that, which I felt was a great shame, because I think there's, but it's one of those things where I feel like if it was a little bit more focused on, like, I think you run a little bit of a risk of trying to like alienate your audience by making it too political and talking about things that could be proved to be incredibly divisive, especially if there are things that happen about it that you don't really understand, or stuff like that. It seemed like, I think it was probably written the way it was because there wasn't I'm not too sure what the alternatives could have been if it was written in any other way. I'm sure there's probably stuff out there that does exist of it, but because the difficulties in trying to write, that I had to choose a different book and do an essay based on that instead, which was a tremendous shame if you ask me, because I'm sure in some way if I had released like maybe an essay based on, like, even in today's world, knowing what I know about the discussions about transgenderism and how it's the way it's like people take a look at it and they form opinions, and it's a very divisive topic. However, it's sort of why you kind of need to be a bit more involved in it. And if I was a little bit more involved in it, I suppose I probably could have picked a different, maybe same topic, but from a different story or a different area, if you will. So, yeah, it's a bit of a missed opportunity in many ways. However, as the month of December was coming to an end and we were just about ready, what we actually did is that about 2 days before we were set to go, we actually opened Christmas presents early, because it was going to be an absolute faff to like have all of this as luggage, because we would be spending Christmas Day at sea, if that makes sense. So, yeah, it was a bit of a rushed arrangement at the very least, but you know what? It was an enjoyable experience, and those 2 weeks in the Caribbean were it was a little bit of a taste of paradise, if you will. I think when we landed in Jamaica, we literally went from one side of the island all the way to the other side in the span of about, I'm going to say about 40 minutes. You're not half become aware of just how small a country Jamaica is, when literally you can cover like the length of the island in less than an hour. So yeah, then we boarded the enormous cruise liner. I think in the 2 weeks we went from Jamaica out at sea, Mexico, the Cayman Islands. Then we went back to Jamaica, we went through Mexico, the Cayman Islands, and then we also spent about 3 days in Havana. And Havana is... I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about Havana, because it is probably one of, if not the only city I've ever been to in my entire life that I think in the next 50 years, the city will look exactly the same as it does now. It probably looks the same now than when I was there 10 years ago. If anything, probably 50 years ago, it probably would look the same, because all the cars the most modern car we ever saw in the whole of Havana was at least 30 years old. Everything else, we're talking about enormously oversized Fords, Oldsmobiles, Buicks, and like a lot of American cars, to say the least. But yeah, and of course, if you've ever seen the pictures and stuff like that of Havana, you know, with all the buildings on the sides, everyone is like every color of the rainbow. The people there also flamboyantly turned out. Everything was colorful. Like, we did not have a single drop of rain or a single cloud in those 2 weeks when we were in the Caribbean. And the sun shone every single day. You literally would be. It was again spending Christmas Day getting a tan in the middle of the Caribbean. It's a bizarre, but an experience I absolutely would love to have again. And I also spent quite a bit of time whilst I was on this cruise getting to know quite a lot of the people who were on board, because we went on a very similar sort of trip across the Mediterranean back in 2012. The staff, absolute top brass of the world, definitely the friendliest cruise staff I think you could probably ever hope for. And I think I was even, when we were like stopped off in the Cayman Islands for the second time, when you could literally like look out of the distance, look straight down, and you could actually see the ocean floor, because the oceans were perfectly clean. They were with no trash. Everything was as perfect as you could possibly hope it to be. And then I also remember spending a bit of my time talking to an 80-year-old woman. I think she British, you see, and it just so happened that we got talking, and then even the captain just so happened to kind of like stroll by. We were like getting lunch and stuff like that, and she starts telling me that when the last time she was in the Cayman Islands was about back in 1972, because they were literally on their way to go to Las Vegas to see Elvis Presley, and she did. She did go to see Elvis Presley after all this, and she saw. She described literally watching him perform live as probably the second, or probably maybe even the third time she's probably ever fallen in love in the whole of her life. She genuinely could not stop singing for Elvis's praise enough. It was a very, very very nice lady, and it was a good talk as well. It's just, you know, when do you think you're ever going to get moments like that again? So, yeah, honestly, what an experience it was, and I would absolutely give quite a lot of money to be able to do that again. To not just, again, I would also like to see a lot of the Caribbean as well, like see even more of Mexico and see even more of the Cayman Islands. I probably would also like to see a lot of America as well. Hawaii as well is something that I think goes without saying. Is I would love to really go and see Hawaii. It just seems right for some bizarre reason. Is it because it's where the sun seems to shine and, well, probably, actually, to be honest. If anything, it's just for the sake of the beautiful... one, the weather. Second, the climate. 3, you feel at peace. It seems to be a place where the sun shines forever and all the weight of the world is off your shoulders. I couldn't tell you exactly... Even in this day and age, I couldn't tell you how much I would just long for just a place of relief. is the phrasing I'm going to use. Anyway, so by the time we got back, by the time, you know, all good things come to an end, you know that. Anyway, so we get back to England on the 3rd of January. We landed in Manchester, drove all the way back to Newcastle. We got home by about, I think it was about 11 in the morning. It wasn't even like a special... I remember this period, so we're into 2016. It wasn't even especially cold. In fact, to be honest, all throughout the rest of the winter, I don't ever remember it ever being cold or anything like that. We had cold days, but it was nothing like, you know, nothing Baltic or anything like that. That's what I'm trying to get at. So, all this goes on, and you know what? All that momentum in the back half of 2015, I was still determined to keep this going because it was once again business as usual. And those who remember many other things that happened in 2016, well, the very first day I went back to school on a Monday, I think it was like the 6th of January, somewhere about that time, we get the news that David Bowie had passed away. It was something that it did cause a profound shock. Maybe not to the same extent when we got told the news that Michael Jackson had died. However, David Bowie's influence on the music world is the kind that you're probably never going to see the likes of again. In the same way we'd probably never see the likes of Madonna or Freddie Mercury, for that matter. So, because again, 2016 was the year when some of the most beloved figures that we came to know were starting to pass away one by one. I'm sure this is when George Michael passed away. George Michael, Victoria Wood, Gene Wilder. There was a lot. There's a lot more out there, but that's to give you an idea just how many great and talented faces we were losing day by day. Yeah, so business with school went on as normal. I was also getting into the habit, if you will, a really cool little habit of just starting to grow accustomed to the idea that since school, like, you know, my time at school is coming to an end, I was going to start to be a little bit more independent in certain other respects, like have a little bit more of a management with my money, and to understand a little bit more about the geography of Newcastle and stuff like that. Because obviously, if the plan really was going to go ahead and I was going to be doing going to Northumbria, I would have to get used to, like, you know, just to start to get life a little bit more in the direction. It was just something to think about when things were going to start coming to a head. So it was again business as usual. Work, and as I usually do in me sort of boyish way, I just kind of I kind of said to people, you know what, the next couple of months are going to be critical, and let's make the most of it, shall we? Because I didn't know how I could have put it in any other way. Many of the people I've known for nearly 7 years, and it was about to come to an end. Something even to this day, to be honest, it's you can't think. It's such a. You know how I mentioned before, sometimes I have issues forming relationships and stuff like that. I think it's because of reasons like this, because this had been going on for many years prior, but it's because of the idea that, you know, things come to an end, and you think that you're never going to speak to some of these people again. Some people, I absolutely just want to say, you start to learn to get over these sorts of things, but some of the people I've, again, still have contact with, and people I've literally never seen. Some of them I haven't seen since I was 16. Some I have only caught up with in very recent times. I have no idea, by the way, if there's an idea about possibly doing some sort of reunion in later in 2026. I wish there was. I've no idea if there would anything like that would manifest, because most people are getting on with their lives, and I mention this because quite a lot of the guys that I went to school with, many of them are now dads. Many of them are starting their own businesses. Many of them are just sort of cracking on with life and just getting on with things, and it's something that you do like to see. And once again, I wonder where on earth I'm even meant to pinpoint about probably where my life's gone so wrong. I'm happy for them, by the way. Don't get me wrong. I'm very, very happy for them. But then again, let's bear in mind, things I've said before. I have no interest whatsoever in having children. That's my own decision. There are some things, however, like I don't really know how to interpret or even how to put into words. I am prepared to say, however, that there's probably many others who probably also have, who just want to prioritize being themselves, and it's just how it is. Do you think I struggle sometimes coping, being myself, or just I feel a sense of inadequacy that because I keep comparing myself or looking towards other people as a reference? Do you think it's something I just should stop thinking about? I don't know is the way I'm going to put it. I really don't know it anymore. So yeah, January goes by, February goes by, March goes by. By the time we get to the end of March, and by the time, we were told to get, really get ready, because in particular when I was doing my English literature A level, we were told this is it, and we had to we were really starting to get, we had to get, if we weren't ready before, we've got to start thinking about whether or not we really were ready, because guess what, you get one chance at this, and as far as I was concerned, a place at university was on the line if anything went wrong. Which is, like I said before when I talked about my GCSE story, it's an incredibly hard thing for a young man to take. Actually, and we'll come back to it. There's a little bit more to this in a second, but I've almost forgot to mention something really, really interesting. It was back when I was back at the end of January, was a momentous occasion. In fact, for a whole week, building up to it was becoming something very, very special. And even a lot of my friends and stuff like that were really gathering around me and stuff like that and telling me, you know what's coming, don't you? Because they didn't forget. Because it was my 18th birthday coming up. One of the... I know it's not even a cliche, because it literally is, for many young people, it is one of the most significant turning points for a man's life, for a boy's life. It's almost when they systematically become a man. I could drink, I could probably buy cigarettes, I could go see an 18-rated movie, or actually play an 18-rated video game. Yeah, honestly, I mean, I know I could have learned how to drive a whole year prior to this, but you know what? That 18 mark means that there was so much I could now do and not even feel like I had to wince or say humbug to. I say this because even sitting here, even at 27, there will still be the odd Raji who demands that they see, you know, a form of ID. That whole Challenge 25 thing. But then again, I don't know many 17-year-olds who have a mustache quite like mine. Just saying. They could have said I had a rough paper round. Oh dear, have I just shown my age? A rough paper round. Where are we going when you say people who say stuff like that anymore? It's a dying kind. Right. Anyway, friends, family, they were all they were all made up, absolutely. And you know what? I felt it was overwhelmingly it was a special occasion, to say the least, and it really was one of those things where, you know what, like it or not, I still felt ready for the world. I just don't think the world was ready for me, possibly. Yeah, it's hard to imagine that in like 2 months' time, it would have been a whole 10 years ago, and where on earth is the time gone? Anyway, so we fast forward to February and then to March, and then a very interesting thing happened again in March. Ofsted inspection. The sort of thing that literally it causes some of the best heads of schools all across the world. Literally, it causes them to sink. And you know what happened? When we was in the middle of an English class late in the day on a Thursday, 2 inspectors came in, and they asked me if they could inspect my work. So here we are, possibly in the last 3 months of my time at school, we get an Ofsted inspection, and they were going to be taking a look at my work as reference, if you will, for what my English teachers... Because I was being taught... I got taught by the head of the department for 4 years. I got taught by the same woman since I was 14 years old, and... She knew who I was. She knew me very well, and she's, I must say, for what it's worth, and I can't believe it's taken me this long to mention it, my English teacher, the head of the department, she is absolutely the best teacher I've ever had in my life. I think she was one of those people who, she absolutely knew what I needed to do. She absolutely knew that for a man like me, I had to have a direction. I had to have focus. I also had to have something a little bit of a challenge where we've given you everything you could, and you seem to absolutely thrive under these certain conditions. So therefore, use that and go and do something fantastic. Really, really let it go, if you will. The kind of which that really I don't even think any of my art teachers or anything like that try to do for me in like 7 years. Because I've had art teachers that were that seemed more interested in, you know, in having orders obeyed, if you will, than actually being demonstrated for ingenuity or creativity or anything like that. It's a really sad way to put it, but yeah, honestly. Anyway, we get to all this, and from what I understood, that they gave a dazzling review for my English teacher based on the representation, if you will, because I was very it was drilled into me. But then again, she was also one of those people who did say all the way back a few months before I was to do my GCSEs is that she wasn't going to talk to us like children. We might have been, like, the average age was like 16 amongst the lot of us, but she also understood that, you know what, You've got to start making the decisions based on what you know and what you want. Remember, the door's right there. If you want to walk out, guess what? There's nothing I can. There's nothing I can do. You make the decision. You are responsible for the choices you make. And she was right. There's no. I wish I did. I wish there was. I didn't. It shouldn't have to be said. But you know what? She knew it, and there was quite a lot of other people. There was plenty of other people who knew this as well. Because there were also plenty of people that, well, many members of staff, I want to say, who never taught me or anything like that, but they also had the sort of air, if you will, of obeying orders and giving out orders as superior to inferior. I think that's sort of like that sort of it depends on just how it's perceived and how if it breeds results, and that other times, if you will, it just seemed as just a way of like bullying sometimes. I don't want to say bullying, but then again, for some people who have no context as to who I am or many other people like me, it's a hard thing to say, because it sounds as if you're just being bollocked at for no other reason. Something that, again, I had many years at school really, really struggling to understand why on earth they're giving me such a hard time. Why am I even being associated with this sort of crowd anyway if I haven't even done anything wrong and I'm being treated as guilty like all the rest? I even remember all of this, like one occasion back in year 10 when I asked the head of year privately that there was no way I was going to be attending this this sort of proverbial warning, if you will, for the year group about an incident that took place, because I had nothing to do with it, and therefore I don't see any reason whatsoever I need to turn out with the rest, because why on earth? What's this going to prove? And because the thing was is that he absolutely understood why, and you know what? He agreed. It seemed egregiously unfair to just throw me in with the rest and to be treated as guilty by not association. I think it is guilty by association, which is a form of discrimination, I must say. And you know what? If I knew the law about discrimination the way I do now, absolutely, maybe things could have been a little bit different, if you will. But that's hindsight once again. Something I think I talked about 2 hours ago. It's now nearly 10:30 at night. So, yeah, like I said, things worked out all right, and I think it must have been seen as a tremendous... I don't know whether or not my English teacher thought it was like a tremendous relief. But then again, it's not exactly as if the inspectors knew who the hell I was. If anything, they'd probably say, well, they know who my dad is, but what difference does that make? So, yeah, we went through that. And it was also during this time where I think I saw one of the deputy heads for probably the last time. He was, I think he was a music teacher, and if he wasn't a music teacher, at the very least, he was a tremendous lover of playing the violin. He was somebody who, I think he tried his absolute hardest trying to get some people in line by teaching them like mutual respect and stuff like that. It's a difficult one, don't get me wrong, and I'm sure because he did have to have like breaks here and there, probably based on certain other things. Anyway, he was actually very well thought of by those who actually did get to know him a bit better, and he died shortly after I left school. Yeah. Right. So anyway, by the time April, and then by the time the middle of May was when it finally began. All the months of preparation, all the months of work, and everything was about to come to a head. And where does it all begin? By spending a whole week doing my fine art art piece. One whole week just to crack on, do something that was representative of of everything I did, kind of like a centerpiece, if you will, for all the coursework I've done since January. And I really treasured those 5 days, because it was 5 days of just swish and flick, work, just complete like a solitudinal like experience in those studios, working, and literally 5 days just melted away. And I remember when it was all over, everybody just kind of looked at each other very, very in a sort of like things were coming to an end. Like this was almost at the end of an era. And it was probably the art piece that I took the most pride in doing. And guess what? So I'm very sad to say this, but I don't think I can even remember picking up an art brush ever since I did that. Which is, I think that's kind of dreadful when you think about it. Maybe in some way we can maybe try and bring something like that back, or bring something else into my life that I've just stopped doing, because some people have recommended that I probably should take up more hobbies or try and do things a little bit differently, or try different things. Variety is the spice of life after all, and I feel like I've been on, videography, broadcasting, and occasionally going to the gym a little bit too much, even in the span of a year, or in my case, nearly 8 years. Yeah, right. Right. So with that out of the way, I had about 3 more weeks, and then I was to actually start my my English literature exam. Now, because I was on the spectrum, I had to go into a separate room, and I was actually because you're allowed to have like about an extra 15 minutes and stuff like that for your exam. To be honest, this is an idea that I have had. I've been very, very, very mixed about this, because on one hand, I think it puts other people at a tremendous disadvantage. Two, it doesn't. I think it feels a bit more proper to actually sit in the main hall and to be able to work alongside with the others. It's one of those things, if you know what I'm saying. Still, I got on with it, and when the 2 hours were over, and there was nothing more we could do, we just sort of everything down. That was it. And there wasn't really, and I think we only spent about 1 more week in school before we were told, it was time for like the not, I don't think they call it the leavers due, if you will. I would also like to say that apparently my parents didn't seem to think much of this whole leavers like mass or anything like that, and they didn't. I didn't go to it. Like I didn't have any sort of group photo or anything like that with the rest of my friends outside. Yeah. I don't know why they didn't think that I didn't want to go. I did want to go to it. But if it was any consolation, what I did go to that night was the after-do party down the O2 in the city centre. I remember I got into town about like 8:30, about in late June, and because the club didn't open for about like 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock-ish and all that, and I had about 2 hours to fill in. So I went to a bar like nearby, and I just kind of like had like an evening meal, and I actually watched the X-Men movie because it just so happened to be playing on Film 4 at the time, and yeah, I sat there, had 2 pints, I had a really nice little meal. I think I had fish, actually, the more I think about it. And I just got talking to like just a couple of other guys and all that. I told them, I'm now, my time at secondary school at sixth form is pretty much officially over, and yeah, I'm just waiting for there's a party and stuff like that. So nice guys they were, and they asked us about did I think I was going to get to university, and even the barman told me that he thought that congrats to the people who do. It's just, it means that it does mean a lot of work, and guess what? Even if things don't work out, it's not the end of the world. Yeah, I wish maybe I should have taken a lot more of his advice, I suppose, because of what happened, the things that happened and stuff like that. So by the time it was over, and I was ready to actually have a dance and stuff like that. Have a dance. Oh, what a great world. And anyway, the line was already forming. I am not joking. By the time I see you couldn't miss them for a mile away. By the time I get to them and stuff like that, the roar in the crowd when these lots saw me is nothing. I can't even put into words what this roar was. These guys who I'd known for years, who I knew even better over the last 2 years, I'd worked alongside. I even during there was like a week's break somewhere in the middle of May. I even spent that entire week. I still went to school anyway because it was open to students like me who were doing art or doing English, and they could have extra time to revise and study, just so everything was tip top and stuff like that. Everybody was. These really were the best friends I'd ever had, and I hope some of them are watching this so they know. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Yeah, it seemed like a small thing, but it wasn't. It was this feeling that actually you felt welcomed. And I've gone through quite a lot of my life with the sensation and the feeling of not feeling welcomed. This was not one of those occasions. This was the occasion. To say the night was an absolute blast would be wouldn't even do it any justice, because you know what? I might not have gone. I might not have been there at the Levers do, but you know what? I was certainly there in spirit, and I certainly was on the dance floor in spirit. And yeah, honestly, just best night of my entire life was that Levers party. And there was even the little thing that happened afterwards that when the party was like dying down at about 3 a.m, I remember because certainly two guys who really got to know me really well during my English classes, twins they were, and these were guys who invited me to go down the Dog and Parrot on the weekend after I turned 18, and yes, I went with them. I had 2 beers, played a game of pool with H and Bakewell and Hollies and stuff like this. This guy I've known since I was like 11 years old called Hollies. Yeah, and everything was just mad, but it was fun, and it was just You couldn't ask. Anyway, so what happened was is that the twins and stuff like that, they were absolutely determined more than anything else that I was gonna get a safe ride home and stuff like that. So I remember when we sort of walked out to, I'm pretty sure outside Waterstones, so they could get me a taxi, because one of the twins absolutely was going to make it known that they were going to take extra care of me and stuff like that. And I remember one of the guys says they don't cater for the R word, and that when the cabbie said that, one of the twins went absolutely ballistic. He looked like he was ready to smash the whole thing up. But, he didn't, and I wasn't even drunk, because I remember the whole thing that well. But you know what? You don't get too many. Those are the sorts of people you want to keep in touch with, to say the least. Anyway, so we went to the next cab, and they were more than happy, and there we go. And about a month later, I get my results. BBC, which means I got to university. Didn't really seem as if my dad was 100% the happiest he could, because he literally told me, go in there, get your results, get straight back out. In fact, to be honest, he didn't particularly seem that happy all the way back in October when I was meant to collect my certificate from the NCS. Even a lot of people who I was on the course with, they said it was very, very surprising that they barely saw me all night. Anyway, so that was that, as they say. And yeah, it was university to look forward to beginning of September, and possibly the chance for a brighter future ahead. Now, my story about my A levels, it pretty much sort of ends there, if you will. And I would admit, up until now, I think it's a little bit of a trivial story. But I hope that this whole thing has been interesting, in the same sense that it was probably the single greatest year of my entire life. Because it could have just as easily been the single worst year of my entire life, and how even a year that I seemed to struggle with the thought of the loss of a dear loved one, or feeling as if I didn't really have any sort of outlets, or how I was ever going to cope at when I left school. It seemed as if. And even though there's probably still a lot of things I absolutely wholeheartedly disagree with during my time, and even in recent years, it doesn't seem as if there's any other way to put it apart from, maybe they weren't 100% having my interests or desire or my needs at heart some of the time. I am prepared to say, however, I certainly made the most of it, because it was still my choice. Some people made choices on my behalf that they absolutely had no authority to do, and I certainly don't want to become that sort of person. But I also have to understand that, you know what, like it or not, we've got to grow up eventually, or at some point. And even to this day, even sitting here at 27, I still don't really feel that any more older than I was. Mentally, I still feel exactly the same as I was when I was probably 16 or even 15 for that matter. I still feel like I haven't even really begun my life yet. And I think I know why that is, but I also think in some way that's just kind of how I've always been. And it matters more for me to be myself, and to know when and where I'm allowed to say things, and that means more to me than having to bow to peer pressure or pretend that everything is fine when obviously it isn't, based on everything I've talked about from the very beginning. And I can, at the very least, say you'll be very, very surprised about the sort of people you do meet in life. Some people absolutely, they have your back. Some people understand you without even having to say it. And there are also people out there who are more than available to talk to. And I don't really know if there's anything more to say apart from that. I still have a lot of pictures and a lot of memories during my time, but now's not the time to look back. Now's the time to look forward. And believe it or not, there's an awful lot of things to look forward to. The future, for one. And even though this year, 2025, has been an extremely difficult, troubling, and a very, very bleak year, I think there's paradise just around the corner. In fact, I don't think so. I know so. That's going to be a beginning, to say the least.